Hey, welcome to your local fast food chain. Can I take your order?
Yeah, can I get a double cheeseburger, large fries, some tots, and I guess a diet soda?
Hi, it's Sav and Jess. Welcome to And a Diet Soda, an opportunity for people to celebrate their successes, share their failures, and hopefully give a little advice on all things relatable along the way.
This community is for appreciating the little things and fostering positive mindsets and intuitive thoughts by talking to people, because chances are they've been through it too.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Sav.
And I'm Jess, and welcome to And a Diet Soda, a future plant-based physician's journey to inclusive culinary medicine. Today, we're going to be talking about nutrition with a very hectic and chaotic lifestyle on a path to becoming a doctor, the importance of fueling your body, diet culture, and self-love.
So, Brooklynne, we're so excited to have you today. For listeners, you may know her or may have come across her on Instagram. Her IG handle is Beats by Brooke. She's a plant-based medical student who is passionate about culinary medicine, intuitive eating, bringing inclusivity to healthcare, and just overall sharing how much she cares about bringing information to the public. In addition to her already chaotic medical school schedule, she also gained her master's in public health, is a mom to two rescue kittens, and is a successful content creator. So thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you today. Some of our questions may seem like loaded questions at first, but we're just so excited to learn about you. So if you just want to kind of talk about what a day in your life looks like and just walk us through kind of steps with your days.
Absolutely. So the one thing about medical school is that it actually changes from kind of where you are. The first part of it is more the textbook, the classroom stuff, AKA stuff I personally am not a huge fan of because I just love the interaction, the people. And then later on is when you really start getting into the clinic. And each school kind of has a different pattern. So for me, it's honestly all over, but I will tell a day, I guess, of what it's like in the hospital, because I do think that is really, unique to medical students. So a lot of times you kind of have to be on your feet. You kind of listen to whoever your boss is that day, try and get breakfast, try and get coffee. It's hard in the age of COVID trying to sip the coffee as you're walking to the door because you're trying to do it like under a mask and stuff like that. And then preparing food. I personally am plant-based vegan. Both people have different definitions for them, so I like to kind of just say both. But also I kind of just like being able to craft my own food. So some people get food there. I personally like to bring my own food. And so it can be kind of intense. A lot of times you're being observed the entire day. You have patients in the care of you, which what is more anxiety inducing than something like that, right? And then it can just be really draining. And for me, I always try and think about or encourage my audience, what is your why behind the way you eat or nutrition or anything like that. And for me personally, because things are so chaotic, is definitely energy. I want to be able to come home at a long day and still do cooking or content creation or whatever it is that I have to do. So for me, I don't look at the labels, I don't look at the scale, but I figure out what foods provide me the best energy, tied with all the just nutrition knowledge I've done in the past, and what's also, of course, going to taste good, because that's the most important thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I feel like my day, I'm also plant-based vegan. It takes so much time to create these meals. How do you even find time? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so classic Sunday meal prep. It's one of those things where you really just have to be disciplined. I try and look at it as an investment, investing time at one point to just really load up meals that you're going to love, which on the record on my page, I am trying to have a medical student meal prep series, because let's be honest, like not every food tastes good reheated. It's just the way of the world. Some things taste so good fresh, but when you try microwaving it, it's just not going to be good. And so I am trying to be really intentional, because honestly, this is the content I would look for. I want to know what's going to taste good, because if a nutritious food doesn't taste good, it's not going to get in your body, and then it doesn't even matter the nutrients, you know what I'm saying? So I always kind of think about that. But yeah, I do try and do the meal prep on Sundays, but in the land of COVID, a lot of things have been virtual, so I'm still kind of answering those questions myself. But a lot of self-discipline and just knowing that it is an investment for your happiness, your health, and your energy later, just really holding on to that, I think is kind of the best tools to making sure that you get the stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any specific foods that stand out to you as like easy to reheat? Because as someone who's not plant-based, I always go for like the chicken or the hamburger or something like that because it's just so easy to zap in the oven. I feel like every time I reheat spinach, it's just this like nasty, like wet, gross thing that's like
Yes.
not appetizing, like slimy. So what are your hints? Because I would love to know what veggies I can heat up without it tasting nasty.
Yeah. So you bring up a huge point, and especially because as someone who lives alone, sometimes I do frozen greens, and like those off the bat are not the most appetizing, but you gotta put it in something that's already kind of wet and sloppy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm talking a loaded chili, and to me, chili is one of the best things. I feel like I'm chili's biggest fan because you can do chili mac, you can do broccoli, quinoa, rice, whatever your heart wants that day, an avocado crema. And so as long as you're just stirring it in between the microwave, that's going to be great. You can cut your sweet potatoes, zucchini, frozen greens. And so I promise you, if you heated up spinach in a chili, it's going to taste right. Kind of on a similar note, a pasta sauce. And even then, you could always put pasta on top of something else if you don't want pasta or don't like gluten or anything like that. That's a really great vessel, if you will. And then I recently put on my page a spicy peanut like noodle salad, if that makes sense. So it was like chickpea pasta, a bunch of veggies, and this homemade, sriracha peanut sauce. Phenomenal. So those are a couple of things that come to mind without loading too much. And don't worry, I plan to post more about this.
Yeah, so I have another question, but this actually popped into my mind when you brought up frozen veggies and fruits. So I feel like a lot of people don't recognize that there's still nutrients within frozen fruits and vegetables, and the concept behind it is crazy. So I know that you've kind of touched on this before. If you just want to share like a little snippet about the fact that there still are nutrients, and most of the nutrients get stored within frozen fruits and vegetables, so that people can be aware of that, even if it's just like throwing the spinach or frozen blueberries in a smoothie as well.
Mhm. Of course, I love this topic because there are some misconceptions. And again, sometimes you do have to cook frozen things differently, but that's why you kind of just want to play with it. You don't want to think it's one-to-one. But when it comes to nutrients, the crazy thing is that a lot of times it can actually be more nutrient dense because a lot of food is frozen when it's at its peak ripeness versus, being plucked before it's ripe. So it makes sense and it kind of ripens in a grocery store. And so that's kind of the beauty of it. And when it comes to food waste, it can be really valuable. Again, I personally live alone. I'm a busy student. So frozen foods are like my bread and butter, which I guess that's kind of confusing, but you know what I'm saying? There's definitely just as much, is not sometimes more nutrients. So you don't have to worry about that. And then in terms of cooking it, you just might want to be creative. So again, spinach, you're not going to make a salad out of frozen spinach, but throwing it in a chili or a pasta sauce, it's going to be amazing. Same with fruit. And it's great too, because it's just going to be a lot of different layers of convenience, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's why I think it's really important for just in general, the online wellness community, just have really inclusive language, because you don't want to make someone feel bad for not being able to get fresh, organic, maybe even your own farm, because that's just not feasible for everyone. And that's just the world we live in.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is such a great myth that you just debunked. I mean, I didn't even know that. I think that's awesome.
I saw your mind like blowing.
Yeah, yeah, it was real time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. That's a huge topic, and I'm just happy to share a little bit in the podcast at all. Okay. So I really want to just get started on kind of how you first became interested in nutrition. I know just from following you personally, you've shared a little bit about how that kind of was incorporated into your life, but yeah, just how you became interested in nutrition and how that is now playing a part as your role as a future doctor.
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting story because my origins of nutrition are really not how I look at nutrition now. And that really goes hand in hand in my passion about intuitive eating and culinary medicine. So for me personally, long story short, I was the more overweight sibling, right? And I feel like if anyone's been in that position, they know what I'm talking about. I feel like both my siblings were just super thin my whole life, but we ate the same. And so as a kid living in a diet culture world, that was really hard to take on mentally. I discovered vegetarianism in middle school, kind of more for curiosity, love the animals, but I did feel a little bit better. So I feel like that was kind of the first spark. That's not why I originally did it. But then when I got to high school, I was already vegetarian. I dabbled in veganism a little, but I just really couldn't kind of make the leap. It just seemed too drastic to me. And then one day, it sounds so cliche for a lot of people who are vegan, but I did sit down and watch a bunch of different documentaries. And this really opened my eyes, which I like to put it out there that a lot of documentaries a lot of times do add a little razzle dazzle, a little drama to get people to watch it. So I definitely don't recommend people taking solely information from documentaries. I like to kind of put that out there. But they can be a good gateway to kind of you exploring a new field. And for me, that really was nutrition. And a lot of the feelings I felt was actually kind of frustration. I was like, okay, we've known for how long that food plays a significant role in health, and yet I can't remember numerous times that I had been to a doctor, especially for something like a stomach issue, where my food and diet wasn't a part of the conversation whatsoever. Maybe my weight was, but definitely not what I was eating. And so things just really didn't start adding up. And when I saw a lot of these doctors on this documentary, it just kind of clicked right there and there. I was like, that has to be me one day. I want that to be me one day. I feel like there's so much potential in bridging this gap between nutrition and healthcare and what we're seeing. And of course, the field of dietitians is phenomenal, but unfortunately, they are not, getting the recognition and prioritization that I believe they deserve. And I do believe that there is a way for people, in the doctor physician side to help bridge that gap along with dietitians. And so that's a kind of a question I get a lot. For me personally, as I started to explore like the healthcare disparities and kind of seeing the potential of free clinics, really kind of drew me more to becoming a medical doctor versus a dietitian, just because I felt like I would just have a unique role in that place. And so unfortunately later on, just because this kind of gradually goes on, I had been so focused on the pure nutrition that it really consumed me, and I was not realizing how it was impacting my mental health and like sensations of restriction. And so it was later in college where I started realizing that I would try and force myself these nutrition rules that I had learned and all this other stuff, and then it would just backfire when I felt like I couldn't keep up with it. And so I was constantly like feeling probably way more superior than I should have felt when I was doing it, but then feeling so, significantly inferior when I couldn't do it. And I think that was kind of the start of me realizing like mental health plays a huge role in nutrition. You can't just have, these equations of nutrition and then be able to just produce it. Like humans are not built that way, and so that ultimately, as I was, in college, pre-med, all that stuff, I kind of got on my radar, and eventually I found intuitive eating, which totally changed my life. So we can get into that later, but that's kind of the origin stories of where I started and kind of where I'm here. I still believe that food has such a huge potential, but how we approach that potential, I've started kind of changing my mind about that.
Oh my gosh, I just love listening to you talk. You're clearly passionate about all of this, and it just shines so brightly through everything you're saying.
Yeah, and I just feel hope when you talk, because I feel the same thing. And it's amazing to come from such different backgrounds, from so many different people. And it's just like the beauty of social media is to come across so many different people. But you really give me hope, because I've felt similar in a lot of situations with doctors. I was definitely the heavier sibling as well. And I just feel a lot of hope when you speak. And I think it's amazing to be able to educate people, especially on the concept of food security, which we'll talk a little bit about, because not everybody does have access to similar things, and they just don't have the money to kind of incorporate these aspects of like nutrition into their lifestyle. So yeah, I just really appreciate you sharing your stories and experiences with us, and we're just stoked. Stoked. There's so much energy here right now.
Yes, I feel it. I love it.
So if you're comfortable answering these questions, we'd love to get into what it's like to be, number one, a woman in medicine, and also a woman of color in medicine, and how that's impacted the education that you have received about nutrition, and how it's different treating people of color and incorporating nutrition into all of those practices.
So far, I've been really grateful, in the world of social media, even though some of these Black creators are providers are few and far between. I sometimes feel like the world is smaller because I'm able to connect with so many. There's a lot of, specifically Black female voices in the nutrition realm. And that's just really comforting. So at the end of the day, my entire journey here has been mostly looking at white males. And how does that make you feel, not seeing yourself represented? I think that it's completely understandable that someone would see that and say, okay, this field isn't for me. I don't know why my brain just doesn't work that way. I kind of like a challenge. I kind of like to see anyone do something and then tell myself, well, if they can do it, your girl can do it too. It might be harder, but I think I can do it. But that's not easy to always come to that conclusion. I don't blame people. So far, I've had a couple of instances with patients. I don't look like a doctor, right? And that's kind of hard to do. I was even just volunteering with some classmates, and there was an older white male patient, and a lot of the community members thought he was a doctor already, while he was actually like a younger classmate than mine. And so just little instances like that, or even just telling people I go to medical school and them saying nursing school, like, oh, basically, sorry, like I'll say, oh, I'm going to medical school. And they're like, oh, okay, to be a nurse. And that it's hard to kind of explain this concept without sounding like I'm putting down nurses in any way. They are the rocks of healthcare. My best friend is a nurse. Like, we do not deserve them. But it's the fact that a male counterpart of mine, can you ever imagine like a male medical student telling someone, oh, I'm going to medical school, and someone replying, oh, to be a nurse? Like, that would just I've never heard of it. None of my friends, classmates have ever heard of it. And just those steps along the way, it's like every step along the way, it just feels like we are just being told that we are lesser than, being told that we have to work harder to look like a doctor. And it's just hard to navigate that when, everyone has their family issues, mental health issues, and they're just having that on top of it. And that's kind of the definition of privilege, right? It's not what you have, is what you don't have to overcome. And it can be tricky. And I think a lot of it is just having faith in yourself, being grateful and looking up to the role models who have kind of paved the way, and then just being able to have a good support system where you're able to just vent and just feel supported through the journey.
Yeah, I feel emotional just talking about this right now. No, I can't imagine. I won't pretend to imagine what it's like to be a person of color in medicine, especially. But I am definitely white passing, and that is part of the privilege that just being white is. But I'm half Hispanic, and I'm the first person in my family to even go to college. And I have had thank you. I have had experiences with white male physicians who have told me some pretty just awful things, which is great. Like comments like, oh, you should just go into anesthesiology because then you can be a mom and you can go like be there from 9 to 5. And I'm like, not only are you downplaying what anesthesiologists do and
Yeah.
go through and their education, but you don't know me. You don't know that I want to be a mom.
Yeah.
Straight. You don't know. You're just, I've had that happen to me quite a few times. It's just an example. So
For sure. Yeah. And, I'm still kind of early in my journey. And kind of one more thing I kind of forgot to add, that this was a big emotional moment for me, is that I was talking to my mentor, who also is a doctor who leads culinary medicine. I'm sure we'll get into that. And I was talking to her about, basically playing it more safe because I am, a Black woman in healthcare. And she kind of just took a second and she was like, that, like, those are your weapons, like those are what makes you have a bigger impact, those are what makes you have more potential. Like, it makes me sad that you see these as a crutch. And I did, and I sometimes still do, and I still, not a crutch per se, but kind of like I need to like walk on glass, be safer, because I feel like I already have ticks against me, which is a real shame. I don't blame anyone for feeling that way, but again, that's where I come back for having a support system, because hearing that from her, I mean, I feel like just changed my trajectory. And that's why you just gotta, put out the energy you want, be open to getting it back in. And that's kind of what you need to get through this.
so yeah, I just appreciate you sharing that, because it's not only as a person of color that you go through every single day, but just as a woman. And I'm sorry that you've had to experience things like that. I know exactly what that feels like. And I hope that together and as a community and creating the support system, that we can continue to uplift each other, because it's powerful who we are as individuals. And I don't know, you can absolutely always talk to me about this because we're all badasses in everything that we've done. And I really hope that you continue to feel that way and have support in your community, because you really have inspired a lot of people, and I've personally witnessed it too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit back to nutrition. We're kind of curious how you plan to incorporate culinary medicine and nutrition into your future practice as a physician, and if you just wanted to talk a little bit about culinary medicine and what that is, and then explain how you wanted to incorporate it.
Yes, let's get into culinary medicine, my favorite topic in this world. So culinary medicine, it's kind of both a field under nutrition as well as a class. So it's made in the scope of providing those in healthcare who don't get the nutrition education that they probably should get to, receive this information in a very hands-on, very applicable way to give to patients. And so for my school in particular, it's different now that things are more virtual, but what happens is that there's usually a theme. So that could be pediatrics, that could be sodium and high blood pressure, that could be allergies. And the recipes for the day have to go along with that theme. And in general, culinary medicine relatively follows the Mediterranean diet pattern of eating. I use diet loosely, but just it really is a pattern of eating. And so I don't have the specifics offhand, but it kind of talks about how many fruits and vegetables a week, how many legumes, lowering dairy and red meat, not eliminating, but just kind of overall a plant-centered heavy type of eating. And so it does follow that. And that's primarily because when it comes to literature, we do have more about the Mediterranean pattern of eating. And so, but again, it is more of a pattern. And so I don't look at it as a diet at all. I think we just get used to terminology, but I digress. And so what happens is that we usually cook the recipes. We do have a dietitian who works with cancer patients who's just phenomenal, and then a doctor who works with both children and adults co-lead it. And I think that's a really beautiful part of it. It really is an integrative kind of field where a lot of people in healthcare get involved. At my school, even PA students, physical training students get involved. And so it's going to vary institution to institution, but the goal of it is to really change the dialogue between food and health, and kind of, making sure that A, we're not focusing on weight, and B, that we're giving actual advice and not just saying something like eat better and lose weight, because those words are so empty, especially when each individual situation is so different. So a lot of the recipes, I think they average to like $1.25 a serving. So financial situation is always, really taking into account. And now I'm talking like a little snack, I'm talking full on meals. And it's actually really cool. During a meeting I was at the other day, it looked at the price for each one. And a big part of it is encouraging plant protein, right? Because not only is it going to have the fiber that majority of people are significantly low in, but it's also going to be more affordable. And that's why it's really valuable for culinary medicine to be a part of education, in my opinion, for future healthcare providers, is because if we don't get enough quality nutrition through school, we're going to get it the same way other people get it, which is just kind of word of mouth and fad diets and things that are not helpful, because it's usually rooted somehow in trying to sell something to you, or something that's going to be so wild that makes good news, right? And so prior to this, basically nutrition training for healthcare providers is very dismal. And what I've learned is that even if it is like a few hours, which I'm not even quite sure, I'm still early on, but we had about a 15-minute video, and it was good information, but that was coming from someone who's been doing nutrition for years. I even talked to some of my classmates, like, did y'all get anything out of this? And most of them said no, because it was kind of rapid pace. I think fiber was talked about for like 30 seconds. I wanted to cry. And if it weren't for culinary medicine, like that's all the exposure my classmates might have had to nutrition. And so it's not only the knowledge, but also teaching future providers that how important it is. Like, we know that it is the number one contributing controllable factor in like all forms of, chronic illness and premature death, or even just like disability, which I don't, say that to like look down at anyone, but just the sheer fact that food plays such a big role. That's a huge asterisk because, of course, accessibility and so many other things play a role in it. But the sheer fact of making sure that people know that that should be on their radar, especially for prevention, is so valuable. And unfortunately, prevention is just not prioritized in general. It was pretty heartbreaking because there's actually a quote like in the official medical oath talking about preventing being the best thing you can do. And yet you don't really see that in education. And I don't want to get too much into it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it doesn't make money, which is very unfortunate because I want medical education to be built on care and health and not money. And that's not necessarily the world we live in, but culinary medicine is a huge component of that. So I plan to take a lot of the practices to my patients, which kind of brings me to another point is that it's really valuable to know where your patient is in terms of changing. Depending on their life situation, they might not be able to be in a place to incorporate nutrition. But guess what? Let's not talk about it at all then. Let's not talk about weight. Maybe they have a bunch of other things going on. It's really valuable to kind of suss out where are they at, because if you're just shouting at them and not having a conversation, you're not going to get that far. And that's definitely something that culinary medicine teaches. I think I answered your question, but I'm not sure.
I want to circle back real quick to the only continuous contributing factor that you mentioned. And I think that line right there is so empowering. Like, you should feel like you are the queen of the world, because it's like that basically what you said right there is that is the main thing that you can control about your health, is what you're putting into your body. And I know that that's an obvious statement, but it really should feel very empowering that you're like, what I put in directly affects how I feel and how my body is going to respond. And I think that's amazing.
And we see that across the literature. Like, this is not new. It's been around for decades. And like you said, it might be obvious, but I promise if I went up to a bunch of different medical students, they probably wouldn't have that answer because it's not prioritized. When a lot of times in medical school, they do it by organ systems. And even for cardiology, which is the number one killer and cause of chronic issues, there's one preventative cardiology lecture. And it was like the last lecture, which I thought was very ironically poetic in a way, but like in a very negative way. Even the teacher said that. He was like, it's kind of weird that this is the last lecture, huh? And I was like, yeah. And that actually kind of brings me to this concept that came to mind, is that this preventative cardiologist who just spoke so passionately and it was so important. But even then, it's like we weren't even really tested on it. Because, and mind you, I do want to acknowledge that it is hard to test on preventative education, because it's not so clear cut, but it's the not so clear cut stuff that is what we're missing, right? It's not like a patient comes from a doctor's office and it's like, dang, I didn't get this right statin prescription. It's like, no, I didn't feel heard, or I was told to lose weight. It's like all these more soft science, fluffy things, like that is what people are missing from healthcare. And I can say that as like a patient myself, that's what I feel like is missing. Not that I didn't get the right antibiotic, which is still important and needs to be tested, but it's these like softer skills that I think should be valued more, which, for those who don't know, a major board exam in medical school actually just moved to pass fail conveniently after I took it, but that's okay. But I do hope that this is a step in the direction of this stuff shouldn't be prioritized. I mean, it's still important. Again, the base education is good, but in terms of like burning students out for something that a lot of times they won't even see again, that doesn't really seem like a good use of time, if you ask me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pre-med myself. I'm non-traditional, but I'm still pre-med. I just get so blown away that nutrition is not a part of medical school at all. I think the last time I looked it up, it was like maybe 20 hours at like once a maybe like that's a high end. But I feel that it doesn't need to be so hard sometimes. Like, yes, you need to go through all of these things in medical school. You need to learn these diseases. You need to learn the treatments. But why are we not getting back to like the basics? Like, food is health. That's just that's it. There's like that's it. I mean, you have obviously these other components like things from genetics and whatnot, but it's just so crazy to me that this is not more widespread. So I think it's really awesome that you've taken it upon yourself to get education elsewhere and really be mindful of that as you continue on with patients as well. So
yeah, and you bring me to a good point. I think it is really valuable to hear these perspectives from people in healthcare. Because I gotta say, before I was in medical school, it was really easy to be like, well, why don't doctors get education? And then now that I'm in it and see all the things we have to go through, the finger should not be pointed at the doctors or medical students themselves. And I want to emphasize that, I had to go out of my way to obtain other knowledge that a lot of people might not feel like they have the time for or like the money for. A lot of these courses cost money, but that's just unfortunately the way we set up. And I remember a while back there was even like a bill in California to like raise the requirement for nutrition just a little bit, and it was shot down. And so it's really unfortunate that I'm sure they probably had a lot of evidence and had a lot of claims, and people still didn't prioritize it. And so yeah, hopefully we're moving forward. I think culinary medicine is definitely an exciting component of this, and I think over like 50 institutions in the US are incorporating it, if not more. I'm actually getting a list together, so look out for that. And I think that really is going to be a valuable way to just move forward in the right direction in healthcare.
I have a question that just came into my mind. So with culinary medicine and fueling your body, is there any industry? I know there is an industry, but do you know anything about like microdosing with like different, because I know that's such a huge thing right now, is either with marijuana or shrooms or like any of those is like I don't know, there are health aspects to that, isn't there?
Well, that hasn't come up yet. And so that's kind of that, but that brings me to a good point in medicine, is that a lot of potentially helpful things, because it takes so long to really study that, a lot of times it doesn't become incorporated. Like even just nutrition in general, it takes a really, really long time and a lot of evidence before anything like that is incorporated, which I think, to the medical institution's point, I feel like that's pretty fair. You don't want to teach a huge cohort of people if something is still pretty new, but I think it's still valuable to at least put things on people's radar. But yeah, unless there's significant, a very clear, quantitative, whatever evidence, it takes a while for stuff like that to be incorporated. And I feel like even now we're behind on some more basic, less fun things. So yeah, I personally haven't seen that quite yet, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I'm glad that that's how you're building your whole brand, is like, unless there's clear quantitative evidence, I'm not going to preach on it.
I try to keep things pretty, at the end of the day, like health is not easy, but a lot of these basic concepts are going to be kind of the same across the board. And I think that's really valuable. I remember, oh my gosh, it was either a podcast or something, this person articulated it so well, but it's like, for all the different diets or patterns of eating, there's like typically like a solid 80 to 90% that's exactly the same. But guess what? That's not news. What news is that 20 to 10% that's different. So let's focus on that, act like these ways of eating are super different, and just confuse everyone. But there's so many base things in nutrition and health that we know for a long time. But again, that's not news. It doesn't get as many clicks, but that's where the important information is at. So I always urge people, if something seems too good to be true or super wild or just came out of nowhere, it probably is too good to be true and is wild and came out of nowhere. And so, just take everything with a grain of salt. Like never, ever just have one person tell you something or one resource. Because even with content creators, a lot of their information comes from the company that's paying them. And I don't think people always process that. Even just now, this company wanted me to do something and I was a little tired. So I was like, hey, do you have third-party resources where I could learn more? And they just gave me their spiel. And I was like, there's no way. But I'm sure a lot of people probably would take that. But I think I've just been in research and science for so long that I need multiple sources, different dates. Let me go on incognito mode, get all this stuff. So again, it takes a while. It's a lot of work, but it's really, really important. And it's what's missing a lot of times, unfortunately, in the online community.
Okay, I want to shift a little bit. I really wanted to talk about your veg news articles. I know that they wrote one about you, but that you also had wrote one for them. I went through and I read it. It was about a more racially inclusive community and about how we can include that in healthcare and stuff. So I'd love it if you would just touch a little bit of about this, because it also speaks to what we kind of touched on in the aspect of trying to create a more inclusive community within healthcare, because and how we speak to people. I'm trying to get my question through without offending anyone who might be listening, but yes,
I think I understand what you're saying.
people are told go to the doctor, they're told, oh, you're obese, you need to lose weight, and this also affects mostly these people of color in their communities. So I just kind of wanted to hear what you had to say about that, and wanted everyone else to hear your words too.
So I really enjoyed this article. I was grateful for the opportunity, and kind of the basis of it is just the fact that words matter, and it's really easy to kind of get into this social media, very privileged bubble, echo chamber, whatever it is you want to call it, where we're giving advice to a very small population of people who can actually easily, act out that advice. And it's really valuable because if someone sees advice and someone's like hyping it up, like, basically the underlining message is like, you can't be healthy without this. A lot of times people are going to see that, say they don't have access or whatever it is that limits them to get it, and see that, the material's not for them, or there's something like wrong with them for not being able to act it out. And it ignores the multifaceted way that health impacts people differently, which is so wild. And so in this article in particular, it's about how the wellness community can just be more inclusive. I specifically do talk about, Black audiences, but it definitely spans a lot of different communities. Of course, people of color disproportionately being in a lot of these circumstances. So, a big one of that is just how firm you are with some of the things you're saying. And a lot of this has to do with like Black or white, yes or no. Basically nothing really in health works that way. And I say jokingly, the only thing that you should ever say like 100% yes is drinking water. That is the only thing. If a content creator says anything else, I want you to question it, because that's the only thing, other than like eating more like plants is good for you, right? But if you're saying like, never eat this zombie processed food, you're gonna get sick, you're gonna die. And I for years, I listened to these messages. And again, this is where you get into these feelings of inferiority that like, oh, wait, I just ate this processed chip and I just saw this content that like, I'm going to die if I eat something processed. Like, if you really take a lot of steps back, you realize that that is not helpful in any way. And we see a lot of research where people, oftentimes feel worse. They end up probably eating that more. And then you're actually like creating the very problem that you want to fear people out of doing. And so it's really valuable to not, especially putting down other food. And that can be tricky, especially as a vegan and someone in the vegan community. I understand that there's a lot of beautiful reasons to put away animal products, right? But it's also really valuable that it's not the same level of ease to be able to accomplish that. And if you're ignoring all those factors, then you're not putting the right message out there, in my opinion, in terms of you're going to push people away from even considering it because they aren't able to, access fresh food, which is a real thing. And I think just that fact alone, people don't always consider, which kind of brings us into the idea of food insecurity, food deserts. There's a lot of different ways. Some people like some terms more than the other, but at the end of the day, people understand what terms are which, if you know what I mean. But yeah, there's a lot of people who either, don't have access to a car to even drive to a grocery store. Even if a grocery store is nearby, they might be more of a fast food restaurant or a gas station. And so I dare anyone who's in a position in the wellness community who's saying you should buy organic, you should buy this or that, like buy groceries at a gas station for a week and just kind of see how that would change how they think about that. But unfortunately, a lot of these voices come from places of privilege, which is nothing wrong with that, but not being open to understanding the lives and the barriers of others. That's where you get into issues, and that's where you have very exclusive language on social media.
A thought that I had, my whole idea around this question is because I spoke to a physician that I work with, and she was a Black woman, and she told me that in college, she had to buy her groceries at the dollar store. And to me, I was just like, wow, like that's crazy. You can't even imagine that. And then I went on to my master's program and started learning about food security. But that is a concept that I think most people who are able to access things don't understand what that is like. Like you can walk into a Sprouts or a Whole Foods, like that's natural to you. But some people might not even have access to walk into a Walmart and get some fresh foods, let alone the discussion on organic versus inorganic is outrageous, because I feel like it really deters people from buying fresh produce at all, because they're like, oh, this is bad for me if it's not organic. What do I do? Like, how about we just start applauding people for the fact that they're trying to incorporate fruits and vegetables into their diet. That apple is so much better than that ice cream bar. Like,
100%.
yes.
Well, the ice cream bar is organic.
Yeah,
So.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started with organic. You bring up a huge point, and like you say you feel that way, but like no, like we see that in communities. And even this idea of the dirty dozen, first of all, already has a lot of different things wrong with it that I'm not going to get into, but let's go back to
Can you explain what the dirty dozen is? I've never heard about that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the Dirty Dozen is a list of like the top 12 produce items that like have like the most amount or most dose of chemicals. And I'm using all these quotation signs for those who can't see it, because a lot of these lists like don't take into consideration dosing or how of the chemical itself or the actual food. But I want to bring up the Dirty Dozen for the sheer fact of the word dirty. Words matter. And if you are throwing the word dirty in front of produce that people likely will benefit from, what are you saying to people? Like, I think people aren't taking these words seriously, but that's the only way we communicate with one another. And if you aren't taking them seriously, what are you doing? And so I'm not saying that there's zero value in the Dirty Dozen list, but I'm saying A, the word dirty gotta go. B, like you said, we need to stop, putting down foods that aren't organic, because like you said, I remember someone even asked me like, oh, like is organic kale better than regular kale? I'm like, just eat the kale. If you like kale, if you like it in recipes, eat it and then come back to me later. And I think it's also, you bring up a good part about the organic ice cream. I've been meaning to talk about this more on my page, but there's a lot of marketing tools to kind of convince people food is healthier than it should be. And even vegan, or even people are using the word plant-based. People need to understand that these terms, a lot of them, first of all, aren't regulated. So anyone could just slap it on anything. I saw someone plant-based that had milk in it, which milk is not a plant last time I checked. But even something like vegan or gluten-free, just because you see this word, it's easy to kind of have in our mind that it's healthy, which companies want you to think, okay? And I say this loving and working with companies, but I really want to equip people with their own internal knowledge that just seeing this word only goes so far. It's like, what is in it? How are you eating with other things? Never just see a word, especially natural. Don't even get me into it. I'm sure people have heard this, but like arsenic is natural. It doesn't mean that much. And so that's why it's really valuable, again, to have people in healthcare, people in social media really understand science and nutrition, so we're able to kind of weed out what we're putting out to the world.
Right, exactly. I think that whole look past the packaging idea is something that people need to think about when they go grocery shopping. Because my favorite example is when a package, when I'm looking, not you two, but when I'm looking for meat and I see a package and it says antibiotic free, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let's just get this across right now. No meat that you are buying in a grocery store will have antibiotics in it, whether it says it on the packaging or not. There's something called a withdrawal period. Like, there's all this that goes into the packaging. And you're right, it's all marketing and it's all a scare tactic, and it's terrible, and it's money. Yep.
And while we're on the topic, there has been no solid evidence against GMOs either. Again, companies think they're going to make more money by having it on the label. Yes. So just don't let the thing scare you. And if you're getting information about it, make sure even me, like I'm not an expert in labeling and like science. I have a friend who is, because if you're getting information about this, make sure you're getting it from someone who knows what they're talking about. I do suss out the material that I do see very well, but again, like there's some things to trust someone, in different spheres, and everyone kind of, not that people necessarily need to stay in their lane. Like I don't like to push that, but and that's why I think it's kind of up to the consumer, unfortunately, because I mean, it's not like I'm gonna snap my finger and everyone is just only gonna talk about what they're, super versed and confident in. But that's why it's really valuable to make sure that, you're, the credentials of the people of the knowledge you're getting it from, depending on the topic. Like if you're just getting someone's favorite workout routine, that's different than, trying to get information on like FDA regulations of marketing terms. They're two different things and they have different value.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's what's so great about like us talking to you and you with your page and everything is branching all that together, because there are people that are experts in their field, but where the real magic happens is when those experts come together. And I feel like we all have our own little epiphanies the more people we talk to, because we're like, oh man, you think the same thing, I think that too. And so it's just, yeah, something really special happens when we all start talking about it, and you tend to communicate it a lot more efficiently to people that are listening. Um, so thank you for all those awesome answers. I want to like transition a little bit with our questions. Can you walk us through what your eating looks like on a stressful day? If you have busy days, if that impacts your eating habits at all, or if you stay on top of it, kind of how that looks for you.
Yeah, so as I kind of implied, I've definitely shifted my own personal approach to nutrition. I used to do the really hard, how can I eat as quote unquote clean as possible? And then I found myself binging quite often. And so through my discovery of intuitive eating and kind of the anti-diet notion, that's really resonated with me more than I can even explain, which pretty exciting news. I just got accepted to start going through the process of becoming a certified intuitive eating counselor. So I'm very excited about that. So I'm starting that journey now. And I think that'll be something really valuable that I can provide to future patients and just people around me. But yeah, so when it comes to stressful, I definitely have just started in general focusing more, and this is a huge component of culinary medicine, focusing more on adding in the good stuff and not feeling guilty, shame, any kind of way about the quote unquote bad stuff, which I hate the good and the bad thing, but for this context, the best way to get it. And so, well, I guess if anyone's curious, when I say bad quote unquote, it's really just a lot of times I like to kind of boil it down to just like more processed things versus, the more nutrient dense is going to be the whole foods, which is not the store, but just foods in their raw kind of formation. So for me, for instance, a great example, the other day, I did like a whole grain bagel. I did, this vegan egg, and then I threw on spinach, sprouts, tomato. And so it really, to me, that was such a beautiful example of, guess what? Your girl was craving a bagel sandwich and I got it, but I also got in my sprouts, my greens, my tomatoes, my phytonutrients. And so that's kind of where I'm at in my journey. I really am focused on kind of the more, again, energizing foods. And a lot of that is kind of just listening to myself. So when I'm stressed, especially I had a really big board exam recently. And at first I went into it, and this is kind of where I think social media can even kind of muddle it. I remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to eat so good. I'm going to like share it with everyone's going to be so impressed. And it was later where I realized like that definitely only added to my kind of unhealthy relationship with food. It's really valuable to be like just really, really in tune with yourself. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel not the best? And just kind of keeping note of that. And that to me is kind of where the mindfulness component comes into. So for me, it changes day to day. Right now, because I'm more free, I'm definitely going out more to eat with friends because I know when I'm in the hospital, that's not going to be happening. And so, yeah, I definitely am in this place now of just trying to incorporate the more nutrient dense stuff and just making sure that I'm not feeling restricted. So it's pretty all over the place. I know that it'll become a little more unified when I do get in a consistent hospital setting, just because it'll have to be. But as of now, especially as I safely visit family and stuff like that, it's kind of all over, but in a way that makes me feel good mentally and physically.
Yeah, that's great. So I think you can, you're like reading our minds, because we're definitely ready to transition to intuitive eating a little bit. So if you just want to tell us your definition of intuitive eating, how you came across it. I know during our intro conversation, you kind of experienced the same experience that I feel like a lot of us go through when we hear about it. We're just like, we kind of shut it out of our minds and don't want to accept it. And then how you were able to come to acceptance with that. And then just your journey, again, a loaded question, but your journey to loving your body.
Yeah, and so even just the idea of loving your body, I could talk about body neutrality, which is a whole different topic. But let me do kind of a natural progression of how things went.
Episode 2, body neutrality.
Yeah, part 2.
Yes, part 2. Stay tuned. So as I mentioned, I would go really hard on eating healthier, binging. And for me, a lot of it was really tied to mental health. Like many, I struggle with just a variety of things, no point getting into that. And I definitely use food as a coping mechanism, which is actually quite common. So intuitive eating, let's just get into that, is a field of, I don't even want to say like medicine. It's kind of like a mixture of like psychology and nutrition, and it kind of is under 10 principles. I'm not going to go into all of them because I'm already been talking a lot, but you can look those up. And a lot of it is just really, first of all, of course, the biggest one is kind of like letting go of diet culture mentality. And diet culture basically it's just all around us. It's the idea that your weight or what you look like is related to your worth, and that you should be spending money, time, or energy on trying to control the way you look because things are complicated. And the beautiful thing of intuitive eating is that it's actually quite based in science. The reason why there are constantly new diets is because plot twist, they do not work. And the idea of intuitive eating is how can we approach, who knew, right? That's why people do them all the time. And that's part of diet culture, right? It's like, let's come up with a diet that doesn't work, make people fail, make them think it's their fault somehow, even though over 90% of people are also failing. And let's try to get them to buy in on another diet. Like, it's just constant cycle that you see over and over again. And intuitive eating is trying to combat in a way that's better for people's mental health and physical health. I can't emphasize this enough. The yo-yoing that people say about dieting with weight is really unhealthy. And I think this makes a lot of sense if you understand the human body. We are constantly trying to aim for homeostasis. And that is a balance of, molecules and whatnot that just keeps things equal. A lot of things going on in the body is kind of like an equation. It's all about a balance. And if you are gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, it's really, really harmful. And we've seen this. And so I think intuitive eating can seem really fluffy, but no, there's actual data showing this. And it is relatively up and coming. And so I just only hope that we get more information on it. I would love to be involved in it in the future. That's probably a career goal of mine. But I came across, actually, I know exactly what this is, so write this down. It's called The Anti-Diet, which is the title of a podcast called 10% Happier. Now, I listened to this and so many things resonated with me. It talked about the feelings of guilt, shame, so much of my time. Like, if you really think back, especially this impacts, women more, spent on worrying about our bodies, trying to change them, and how much that time could be used for other things literally gives me chills, because it is just a shame that people are holding back from their goals, their mental health, so many things, because we've been told time and time again that we need to change or make our bodies look a certain way. And so listening to this podcast, it really just kind of hit. And I had heard of this term called health at every size. And again, I just kind of blew it off because I didn't understand. I'm like, what are you talking about? Weight does matter, food matters. And I think that kind of is a big thing, is that a big component of this is not necessarily saying that weight means nothing, but saying that weight is so complicated that being your focus is not going to get you anywhere. And we see that time and time again. And so intuitive eating is just this beautiful field that, mind you, the journey is not linear, but most journeys aren't linear, mental health journey, covering for trauma, anything. And that's how life works, right? And so intuitive eating definitely approaches this idea of some foods being good, some foods being bad, focusing on weight. And so for me personally, getting this on my radar was huge. It made me look at exercise differently. I started looking at exercise more for joy versus trying to control my body. That's been a game changer. You get so much more enjoyment out of life as a whole if you can kind of let go of diet culture and embrace intuitive eating. They have a general book out to the public. I couldn't recommend it more. And just for me too, is just kind of, letting go of, I can't eat this, I can't eat this. And if we're being totally honest, there is something to say about being vegan, especially depending on your financial situation. It is sometimes harder, especially financially, to come across some of these foods. And that is why I personally try to be as open-minded as possible, because you never know the mental, financial, any journey someone else is going through. And so you're only going to be a better listener or person in their life if you can just assume that you don't know, because so many different things impact it. And if you're coming from a place of privilege, it can be hard to see, but that means you should be even more open-minded. So where I'm at now in my journey is kind of being able to approach nutrition a little bit more after about a year and a half of kind kind of letting it go. And that was really hard, especially when, what drove me to my career was nutrition. And so letting go of nutrition, which I knew for my own mental health and my future happiness was what I needed at the time, but it was not easy because I'm constantly unlearning, again, a lot of these fear mongering that just get inside your head and just wreak havoc. But now, again, kind of like I mentioned, finding a way to approach food that has nothing to do with changing your body or weight. And then for me personally, that is energy. There's so many different things I want to do throughout the day in life, and I want to have the energy, and I know the food contributes to it. And so that's kind of where the nutrition, the mental health come in hand in hand. And yeah, it's been phenomenal. And just to kind of quickly touch on body neutrality, it kind of goes not against body positivity, because body positivity is like loving your body, all different shapes and sizes, blah, 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 blah. But body neutrality is more seeing your body not as what it looks like, but like what it does for you, which is really hard because I am single. And I think a lot of people who talk about this, I notice, are in committed relationships, which is nothing wrong with that. But it is really hard to be body neutral when you know that people are judging you off of your looks. So if anyone out there thinks it's hard, I just want to share that because I haven't heard that narrative that much, and I wish I did. So I guess I'm gonna do it. So it's been an interesting journey, and I know I'm still on it, but it's crazy. I just got tickets to Hawaii. What? I am vaccinated and I plan to be safe. Also, you have to get tested before you go anyway. But knowing that I'm gonna be on the beach, like 2 years ago, me would have just dreaded it. It would have thought about what can I do now for 2 months. So I look a certain way, and I'm like, nah. I'm going to be happy. Will I necessarily post the photos? Maybe not, but like, I'm going to focus on the activities of people around me and not what I look at. Because guess what? Like, no one's really looking at you like that for the most part. Like, a lot of that's kind of letting go of those sensations. And I almost want to tear up thinking about going to Hawaii, thinking about how much focusing on my body and my appearance would have taken away from a trip like that. Like, what a shame. But that happens in micro ways that just add up, unless you can really break free from diet culture's values.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We are our number one critics, aren't we? And it's so hard. Every single person can relate to this. I mean, I know friends that have literally said to me, oh, well, I was going to go on that vacation, but I don't want to see myself in a bikini. So I'm just not going to go. Like, what, girl, you're missing out on a vacation because you don't want to see yourself. And then other people that are like, I'm going to start dating, but I'm not where I want to be with my body right now. So I'll wait until then. And it's that is so negative and so heartbreaking. I mean, personally, I had Sav and I were talking about this like a month ago. I had a Pinterest page my freshman year of college, and the title was "Let's Try to Look Hot." Like, are you kidding me, Jessica? What the heck were you thinking? Like, that is just so terrible. So
people really think they have to put a pause in their life, and I hope if we could see something beautiful from COVID is that like sometimes life is going to take a pause for you. So if you don't take life, by the wheel, what's the expression? When you can, then like there you go. Whatever. You're gonna look back and you're gonna regret. I promise any person you talk to that's like older in age, like, do you think they, what are they gonna regret? Probably not doing that thing because they want to look a certain way. No, they're gonna like regret not pursuing social relationships or opportunities and stuff like that. And so, but it's hard. I don't blame people because we are literally rooted in this from like the youngest possible age. I think people like basically the earliest kids can even comprehend diets. A lot of them try doing it. It is the saddest thing if you ask me, and we've all been there. And that's why intuitive eating and just this concept of letting go of diet culture has so much potential, maybe not to make money, which is what companies want to do, but to really truly change lives of so many people. And I remember bringing this up to a classmate, the concept of intuitive eating, and he was like, oh, so how like everyone eats? And I was like, honey, do you think everyone like, and maybe this was just coming from their particular perspective, but I thought that was really interesting. So I'm like, honestly, I can find anyone off the street and show you a way in how like diet culture has like taken away from their life and might still be doing it. So I think it's really common, and just educating people on the commonality of it is really valuable.
Yeah, it's just really sad to realize how many of us have had these experiences. I mean, as we've been doing this podcast, we have literally realized that every single one of us, I don't know if it's necessarily like a full out eating disorder, but every single one of us has experienced this. Like
the spectrum, yeah.
Yeah, and I've like gone on vacations with friends and I had a great time, and then pictures come out and I feel so bad about how I look in those pictures that I just every good memory that I had of that trip is just gone. And it's just I share that not to feel sorry for me, but because so many of us have experienced these things.
It's so normal.
And I hope that by us having these conversations, people can start to learn that they're not alone. And I highly recommend that everyone takes a moment to look into the resources that Brooklynne explained. The book is a really amazing, just starting to be mindful and tender with yourself. And the energy part was huge for me because I love exercise, but for so much of my life, it's been about what can I do to make me look the best. And I broke like my back. I've hurt myself really bad just trying to do these things that are not only damaging for my body but to my mind. And to start to do things like I fell in love with yoga because it was part of my like rehab and recuperating my body. And so do things that make you feel good. And honestly, once you start to feel good, you really start to look at yourself differently, even if your body doesn't change. So yeah, we just wanted to know if you could give a couple of examples of things that you say to yourself when you're having those bad days, because no matter what, we still all have those bad days. How do you speak kindly to yourself in those moments of doubt and moments of inevitable like hatred for ourselves?
Of course. So for me personally, I try and think about the complexity of health and appearance and weight and just kind of give myself grace in that respect where, there's so many different components that contribute to this. And then, but me having one feeling of, negativity doesn't typically look at just the variety of things that contribute to it. And just reminding myself of how far I've come and what all I contribute to the world, to my future, and none of that has to do with how I look. And just really kind of holding firm on just, the support system I have around me, phenomenal people wouldn't be in your life if you weren't phenomenal back to them. And knowing that anyone valuable in your life would hopefully never judge you based on what you look like. And if they do, they gotta go. And just knowing, what would I say to a friend if they felt this way? What would I say to my best friend in the world? Or I really like to hear, think of one person you care about the most. And obviously you care about a lot of people, but if they were saying these things to themselves in like an inner voice, like what would your response be? And I find that that's really valuable because like you mentioned, we are our own worst critics, and yet we give people this, we just throw out grace and forgiveness. And yet when we look at ourselves, it's not you, the standard is so much higher and it's just unrealistic. So I think those things I try and remind myself because I have the low days. And just, go ahead and cuddle a cat, maybe get some sun in and just do things that I know will, without fail, make me feel good and they have nothing to do with what I look like.
I love that. That's such good advice to think about if it was happening to someone that you loved, because I feel like people, they take a lot of hate from, or a lot of abuse from other people as well, like either in the workplace or family or whatever it is. And you just kind of take it because you're like, whatever, like I can handle it. But think about if that was happening to your best friend or your sibling or whatever, you'd be like, oh, hell no. And you'd like go all mama bear on them. So do it for yourself. Be your own advocate for yourself and for other people. Yeah, exactly. So what advice would you give to people who are like just starting on this journey, and advice, like little tidbits for ways to get into nutrition and just starting to be a little bit more mindful about things?
Of course. So I definitely recommend podcasts like this. I think hearing the personal stories resonate the most, right? Like naturally as humans, we respond to storytelling. And so if I handed you a book about nutrition that just was like very cut and dry, that's only going to go so far. And so I think there's just so much beautiful, value in podcasts or just listening to people, but also look at your social media feed. Like how diverse is it? Who are you following? Like how does it make you feel? And there's so many phenomenal accounts out there. As I mentioned, it's good to check out what they're doing, how they're educated, but there's so many great ones who touch on a lot of different topics. And so if you're going to be on your phone anyway, you might as well have it be material that educates you, makes you feel good about yourself versus the opposite, which a lot of times social media does. And so, those are right at the touch of your phone. Of course, if you're interested in kind of pursuing it and you love it, there's so many different routes to take. While I'm doing medicine, I always like to encourage people that there's endless paths. And if I learn anything, I feel like the further I go down in medicine, I'm like, oh, that's a path too, and that's a path too. And so making sure that you're really, really exploring, and make sure you don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes people are busy, but a lot of times people love to mentor as much as people like to be mentored. And so I think it's always really valuable to not be afraid and just shoot your shot. Because again, like, it's so cliche, but yeah, if someone's busy, they either will say no or they just won't reply. And then guess what? You can look for someone else. So I guess that'd be my advice.
So on a lighter note, we have one question from a viewer, and I think it's great, super helpful. And they asked, what snacks do you eat that are quick but nourishing?
Quick but nourishing, I like it. So I think that whatever size portion you're looking for, I think the whole grain PB&J, I know it's classic, but I'm always really big on filling too, you know what I'm saying? And so you don't want a snack that's going to leave you hungry later. And so depending on where you are, again, I'm coming from the mindset of a hospital, I need something I can throw in a bag. So smoothies are great, but sometimes like they aren't as portable and stuff like that. But yeah, any kind of thing where you're combining a fruit and like a healthy fat and like a whole grain can be a really great snack, especially if you're not getting fruit at like the meal time. And so that kind of brings me to like an apple and peanut butter. Again, that's going to be really nourishing, but also I feel like sometimes people sleep on popcorn. It's actually a whole grain. Of course, depending on what you put on it, there's actually a lot of really easy ways to pop your own. And so that way you can kind of control what goes on it. But that's definitely another go-to snack for me.
Yeah, and making jam yourself is actually so easy.
So easy. Yeah, I've been doing that.
What are we, colonial?
No,
I've
like,
never tried that.
and it's so good too. It's like so delicious. I actually think you got up your page, or you had posted something.
I posted, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna do that.
All right,
like,
I got
chia
strawberries in the fridge. You want to do that after this?
Yeah, and
we're
chia-
gonna. Yeah, I have.
I went on a hiking trip with my family and I brought a huge container of it and I made everyone PBs&J for the hike. And so yeah, it's pretty, once you get the hang of it, and then you know exactly what goes into it. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the less nutritious components of food are things that makes up shelf, oh my God, it's a tongue twister, shelf stable. And so making it yourself, like, yeah, maybe it won't last 2 years in your pantry, but if you know you're going to use it that week and the next week, you're probably good to go.
Okay, so we want to get through our little speed round. So it's basically like a this or that round. So we're just gonna we're gonna just go back and forth and throw you some items, and then you just choose your favorite, basically. So we have a few here we're gonna go through. It'll be super, super fun. So first one, morning or afternoon/evening workout?
Morning.
Nice. Cake or pie?
Oh, pie.
Book or ebook?
Ebook.
Tempeh or tofu?
Oh, tofu. I wish I liked tempeh more, but tofu and I, we're in a committed relationship. Tofu scramble every day.
What's some of your tofu recipes though? Because every time I walk in the grocery store, I have like my staples that I always get, and I walk past that tofu and I'm like, dang you, my arch nemesis. Like, I wish I knew how to make you, and then I just go for the chicken instead.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, you should actually, just because it popped in my mind, Plant You, my girl, shout out, just put a phenomenal crispy tofu recipe. So after this, check it out, and it seems pretty foolproof. So hopefully we can change that for you.
Okay, I will.
That's usually my struggle. I love tempeh, but I always have struggles making tofu. I'm still trying to like really master it. But
dressing up or dressing casual?
Oh, casual. Your girl likes, yeah, no, I'm always casual. Honestly, that hinders me from going out from anything else, is just wanting to be. I also dance most of my life. This is not quick. I'm so bad at this. I dance most of my life, and I have a rule, like if I can't do the splits in an outfit, well, I'm not wearing it. But so yeah, that's like 90% of the time. But when I do go out, I feel like I go all out. So, but definitely casual.
Maybe if I wear what you wear, I can do the splits.
I think that's the magic touch. Easy. Don't try that at home, anyone who's listening.
I love that. Okay, dine-in or delivery?
Delivery. Again, comfy vibes. I'm all about comfy vibes.
Netflix or YouTube?
Oh, okay, it's supposed to be quick. Okay, fine. Netflix, they're so different though. I do watch a lot of YouTube though.
Okay, perfect. Okay, this one's a goofy one. Toilet paper, over or under?
Or as I like to say, mullet or bangs.
God.
I've never heard that.
I mean, right though?
Okay, see, okay. Oh my God, I can't answer this. I'm gonna say under. Do you want the explanation?
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw over, but then I recently read that toilet paper was marketed as over because it doesn't stop it as easily. So under, it actually stops it so you don't use as much. I don't know if that's true. This is a TikTok revelation. But after I saw that, I was like, they would do that though. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Fight the people, fight the toilet paper companies. I'm putting it under. I'm going mullet.
So now under, but my heart says over.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Mountains or ocean?
Mountains.
Love that. Okay. Thank you for doing our speed round with us. So we're just going to announce really quickly our weekly challenge. So each week we've been doing this, just an easy challenge, easy, hopefully mostly attainable challenge that can still be kind of difficult for people. So for this week, we're going to just throw out something that's really kind of resonated with us during our conversation. So if you have access to it, walk over to your frozen section and grab something new from that section. Maybe it's spinach, maybe it's a fruit. Just grab it, try it out, see what you're able to incorporate it into your meals, and see how you like it. I love it because I never eat all of my fresh blueberries. My frozen blueberries, they're always there for me for my smoothies. So yeah, give it a shot. Let me know. Okay, well, Brooklynne, we just want to thank you so much for being so authentic and real and raw with us. It was such a beautiful conversation, and we really appreciate you taking some time to be here with us. For our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and following along. We quickly just wanted to give some of the feedback from our listeners so far. We did this last week too, but I just wanted to give a shout out to, we both have a common friend, Grace, who has been there listening to us every step of the way and shouting us out and really learning from us and our listeners. So I just wanted to give you a shout out, Grace. We love you.
So you can find Brooklynne on Instagram at Beats by Brooke, beats like the food, and also can engage with her and her community by using the hashtag Mo plants, less problems. So to become a part of our family and community, join us on Instagram or Facebook at And Diet Soda, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you were able to give yourself a little love today. You deserve it.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and check us out on social media for weekly conversations and attainable challenges for your health.